Watch TV, your local news source. This is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Governor Mike Braun is defending his decision to turn 3 IU trustee positions that are elected by alumni into appointments by the governor. And he says both Indiana's revenue shortfall and the economic turmoil that caused it might be short-lived. Those comments came at an event marking 100 days in office.
Did IU President Pamela Whitten request that change the IU board?
No. I think that came collectively from folks in the legislature. I did not say that I was against it. It wasn't representative. It enabled a clique, a few people, to actually determine 3 board members, and I don't think that is real representation. If it was more broadly ascribed to, it would be different. And then when it comes to our flagship university, I wish it was paying more attention to what the other flagship university was doing, and that is given Hoosiers real value by keeping tuition, room and board to where you can afford it. Whether it's India, Japan, or South Korea, the first one that happens, it'll cascade the other way. So the forecast was built upon national variables. We're a healthy economy because we believe in rainy day funds, balanced budgets, and when you have to deal with that, you're going to have to plan for it. That could just as easily dissipate favorably if things work out. And when it comes to what we really cut, nothing got hammered, and the most important stuff stayed intact. I don't want locals or school districts to be starved of revenue, but here's how you define it. You can't expect it to go up much more than 3% a year. That's robust growth of the economy. If you're asking for that, you're asking to grow your government faster than the economy or the taxpayers can pay for it. That will be my guiding principle. This was a lot when you look at SB 1, which I knew we weren't going to get all of that, but I didn't think it would be put into a shell, and that's where those last 10 days of negotiation got it up to where, to me, it was worth banking it, knowing that we're just starting on the issue. It took Mitch Daniels 4 years to get circuit breakers put in. We did this in 3.5 months.
Well, public health departments here in Indiana are losing millions of dollars in both state and federal funding. The new state budget cuts come on the heels of a loss of federal dollars. Our government reporter Garrett Berquist explains how this will affect services in your county.
Public health officials here in Johnson County tell me they had partnerships set up for tobacco cessation and obesity prevention. Those partnerships are now almost certainly dead. The current budget year is the first time Johnson County accepted the state's Health First Indiana funding.
I had a feeling that we were not going to get fully funded as the State Department of Health had hoped we would, but I didn't realize the cut was going to be quite as drastic as it was.
State lawmakers had planned to set aside $100 million in each of the 2 upcoming budget years for local public health departments through the program. When revenue projections dropped, they cut that sum to $40 million each year.
We absolutely will not be able to provide some of the same programs that we're providing this year, or I guess I should say we are not going to be able to fund the partnerships that we've formed.
They included tobacco cessation programs and Stop the Bleed and CPR classes for teachers and community organizations. Swearingen says after-hours care and weekend services also might be affected. Those state cuts came just weeks after the Trump administration froze federal public health dollars. That cost Johnson County a partnership to fund nurse examinations of sexual assault victims and an immunization grant. The Indiana Public Health Association says we lost about $400 million in federal public health funding in all.
They don't know, how they're going to keep their doors open. They don't know how they're going to keep their staff engaged and caring for their communities. In many of our counties, local health departments are the care. They are the entities that are making sure that people have food, people have housing, people aren't dying in the streets.
Swearingen says she'll still be able to perform basic services such as health inspections and vaccinations. And she says she does not expect she'll have to lay off any staff.
We have been good stewards with our finances in the past and have some residual funds still still in our accounts. So we probably will focus some of those funds towards our programming, and we will always be pursuing opportunities to apply for grants, both federal and state grants and community grants that present themselves.
Those funding cuts aren't necessarily permanent. At the end of the legislative session, Senate President pro tempore Rod Bray told me if the revenue situation improves, lawmakers hope to expand public health funding again in the 2028 to 2029 budget. In Franklin, I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV and WishTV.com.
Senator Todd Young is pushing a new shipbuilding bill in Congress. It's called the Ships in America Act. It's based on the Chips and Science Act. The measure set up tax incentives for shipyard investments. It also establishes new education partnerships and creates a national maritime advisor. Young says this is as much an economic security issue as a military one.
Teddy Roosevelt understood this. He knew something about naval history and shipbuilding. He said that the spread of our trade in peace and the defense of our flag in war depended on America possessing the world's largest commercial fleet. But right now, with our rusted maritime sector and abandoned shipyards, we're very far from having that. The opposite is true across the Pacific Ocean. Today, China has 5,500 commercial vessels in international commerce. The United States, 80. They build 1,000 ocean-going ships every year. We build roughly 5. We should call this convergence, the rise of China's commercial fleet and the fall of our own, what it is. It's a pending national crisis. If our economy depends on goods carried aboard Chinese flag vessels, our supply chain is always at the mercy of the Chinese Communist Party. If we have only a few seaworthy commercial vessels, we'll struggle to transport our troops to the front lines in the case of a conflict in the South China Sea. If our commercial shipyard industrial base continues to collapse, if we do nothing, we'll be unable to build and repair warships. It's, of course, time to change course. It's time to rebuild our merchant marine. Help is on its way. The Ships for America Act is our blueprint to begin this endeavor. Our bill will fund and cut the red tape stalling U.S. maritime policy. It will boost the U.S. merchant marine, revive our shipyard industrial base, protect our people and economy from foreign threats, and provide good-paying jobs to Americans. Americans whose creativity will help build the commercial fleet of the future.
All right, coming up here on IU students facing criminal charges related to campus protests against the war in Gaza. Welcome back. An IU grad student facing more than a dozen intimidation charges because of Christmas cards that she sent to IU Board of Trustee members. ITMate's Cody Fisher gathered details on what those cards said.
Maria McComish is facing intimidation charges in 3 separate counties. Calls for Indiana University to divest from Israel go all the way back to the protests in Dunn Meadow last April. Court documents say the Christmas cards make those calls to divest illegal because of this language. You have until Jan 13th to meet these demands, or we will escalate to match the severity of the situation. We will not rest until you are no longer complicit. It was signed, sincerely, the IU Divestment Coalition. Because the cards called the killing of Palestinians genocide, the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office says the phrase, "we will escalate to match the severity of the situation," means the cards are threatening to murder the Board of Trustees members who received them.
That is our interpretation of the letter. We believe the intent was very clear.
The prosecutor's office says the cards crossed the line of what is allowed under the First Amendment.
The First Amendment definitely comes in freedom of speech, but this is not an acceptable expression of political thought or political speech. Being free to express and having an open marketplace of ideas is something that's very important and a cornerstone of our society, but that does not mean that you get to threaten or intimidate people into doing what you want them to do.
The judge gave McComish a $15,000 bond. Her attorney did not want to speak with me on camera, but said, like any young girl being held, she wants to go home. But under the circumstances, she and her family are doing fine. He added that she has tremendous support from her friends.
For IT Mate, I'm Cody Fisher for Wish TV and WishTV.com.
Well, coming up here on All Indiana Politics, Indiana's best political team tackles controversial comments on slavery from Indiana's lieutenant governor.
It was not a pro-discrimination or a slave-driving compromise that the founders made. It was actually just the opposite. And what that did, it actually limited the number of pro-slave representatives in Congress by 40%. This was a great move by the North to make sure that slavery would be eradicated in our nation. They knew what they were doing.
I definitely wouldn't have used that characterization, and I don't like it. I'm a believer that you better start thinking about what you're saying before it comes out. So I'll leave it at that. I think that you don't want to make headlines the wrong way, because it takes away from the substance of what you're trying to do in general. So that'll be the end of my comment on it.
Okay, so those comments from Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith ignited a storm of controversy, now entering its second week. And clergy and Senate Democrats call that response from Governor Mike Braun inadequate. That sets up our first question for two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Dana Black and Republican Tom John. Good to see you both. Dana, we'll start with you here. Clergy groups here in Indianapolis say Braun questioned Beckwith's wording when the real problem really is the views that he conveyed. So your thoughts on all
Absolutely.
This?
So, Micah Beckwith, unfortunately, is not a historian. Okay, and he attempts to use biblical references as a way to codify his opinions. But you have to remember, some people back in the days of enslaved humans also used the Bible to justify slavery. Micah Beckwith is an unintelligent individual when it comes to history. He also is trying to use white supremacy and his white Christian nationalist views to, somehow solidify these ideas. This is nothing new. He's been coming with this nonsense for a very long time. And I'm sorry, Governor Braun had an opportunity to squash it, and he did not. But if you look at the history of Mike Braun, it's not like he has been reaching out to the black and brown communities of Indiana. So I'm not all warm and fuzzy over his pushback on that, because he's not actually had any real conversations with black folks.
Tom, does Micah Beckwith owe an apology to black Hoosiers, and also should have the governor maybe gone a little further with what he said condemning this?
Well, I'll go sort of backwards. I think the governor was clear. I don't think he has to clarify anything more. I think he said this was wrong and you should think before you speak. And those are time-tested and true rules that, in fact, you should do that. Micah Beckwith ventured into a space that I don't know what he was thinking when he did. I don't know why he went out and did this. But the fact is, he said some things that were offensive to people, and you should apologize when you're offending people. I mean, that's the reality of it, is he ventured into a place that really had no place in a much larger and more important conversation of the great successes that came out of this legislative session, and really did have, it showed what a political neophyte really is, because you have a lot of great things to talk about, and he went out and completely created an issue with the discussion by doing this. So
some
disappointing.
People, Tom, as you know, some people say this is par for the course in today's Republican Party, that these views are a little bit more mainstream within Republicans. Your thoughts?
Well, these aren't views of the Republican Party. These are views of Micah Beckwith, who, quite frankly, likes to have his views out there regardless of whether they're thought through or not. And, we're looking at a situation where Governor Braun has a lot to celebrate in this session. He had property tax relief. He's trying to improve the health of Hoosiers. He's trying to do a lot of great things for our communities. But instead, we're talking about this, which is unfortunate. And frankly, if Micah Beckwith had the best interest of the state and the Republican Party, he would put it to bed by giving an apology.
Go ahead, Dana.
I think it's wonderful that you feel that way. It just speaks to your heart and your passions about, making sure that Indiana thrives. But unfortunately, I do understand why Micah Beckwith Beckwith says what he says. It is a part of a much larger plan. It coincides with the anti-DEI rhetoric. It coincides with the immigration rhetoric. It is this notion that only white males, white Christian males, belong in America and have validity in America, and those opinions matter. This is not, it is par for the course when it comes to the Republican Party, because everything that they introduce is anti-black, anti-immigration, anti-anything that's not Christian. I know that you don't feel that way, but unfortunately Micah Beckwith does feel that way, and there's a whole following of folks that believe the same thing that he does.
So Governor Braun's response came during an event talking about his first 100 days in office. So let's turn to that topic now. How would you, Tom, evaluate his first 100 days in office?
I think you've seen great actions. You've seen what he promised in the campaign, which was property tax relief for Hoosiers. You've seen them making initiatives to improve Hoosier health. You've seen a new initiative on how they approach economic development. You've seen them undertake new legislation to improve public safety. You've really seen a lot of activity in partnership with the legislature, where the governor has come to them and he's wanted to be a partner. I think that coming out of this, understanding, right, this is the toughest session for a governor, because you're coming in, you've just taken office, now you have to get there. He jumped in with both feet, and I think can be proud of the session that they had.
Same question, Dana. Also, how would you evaluate the Democrats' reaction to Braun's first 100 days?
You know, they've done the best that they could, being in the super minority. Mike Braun's, his tax relief attempt was more like a shell game. So yes, you gave property tax relief, but then you also gave municipalities the ability to raise income tax to cover the loss that those municipalities will not have because of property taxes. I think that the anti-DEI rhetoric and the idea that, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a problem, when you know, and historically we know, that people have been denied access to opportunities because of their race, gender, and sexual identity. But I think that there were opportunities to do things better. I'm glad that the universal voucher thing died. So that wasn't on Braun, that was on the legislature, because again, do we need to give, you know, people who are ultra wealthy a $7,000 coupon to send their kids to private schools when they were going to do it anyway? I am not all that pleased with what he did. I'm not all that, it doesn't stand him and go, ooh, because he didn't actually accomplish what he said he was going to accomplish. It was a little bit here and a little bit there. But that also speaks to the fact that politics is about compromise. He was not going to get everything that he wanted, because there was going to be pushback.
Let's turn to that story that we heard in the last segment, shall we? An IU graduate student facing intimidation charges. Prosecutors say that the line about escalating pushes the Christmas cards out of the First Amendment protection. So Dana, your thoughts on that, and also the cards that she sent out?
Yeah, I guess those cards were open to interpretation. There was no literal saying of violence. They didn't say that they were going to hurt anybody. They did not say they were going to physically come after anyone. They said it required the same attention that what was happening in Gaza and Palestine. So people interpreted it the way they wanted to. I think it does cross the line in First Amendment, because we are literally seeing people dragged off the street for having a difference of opinion with this current administration, but now you're going to prosecute this person over here. It's all in line. Like, literally, if you believe that Palestinians deserve to have life and where they live, then people will say that you're anti-Semitic, and that is not true. And they are literally being dragged off the street and put in prisons without due process, or sent to El Salvador without due process. This is not unusual. I don't think it crossed the First Amendment, because again, it was open to interpretation.
Well, less than a minute left. I'll let you respond as well, Tom.
Well, I think that the cards were certainly in poor judgment. I think, just looking at from a legal standpoint, ultimately, I think that this is something that the First Amendment will not allow the prosecution to stand. We don't know what will happen, but just from an analytical standpoint, did she subjectively intend to murder them, which is kind of the underlying piece? Right. I don't know that you'll see that proof. I doubt you do. If you do, then maybe it'll uphold, but I don't think it will. But it was tremendously poor judgment, and it goes to the current culture that we need to talk, not everybody be hyperbolic when we're going about having hard discussions about tough issues.
I agree.
More conversation, the better.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, poor judgment, definitely, but criminal,
Yeah. All right, well, we'll see, and we will cover it. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for being in studio.
Pleasure.
All right.
Pleasure.
We'll be right back. Much more to come after the break. And thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. You can always find us, again, on our website, wishtv.com.